This seat's for our elite platinum members. Economy's your place, Emily Sanders said, her voice coated in saccharine authority, though the disdain beneath it stung sharper than steel. She stood stiffly in the first-class cabin of Pinnacle Airways Flight 394 from Dallas to New York, eyes locked on David Harper, a composed black man in his mid-50s, already buckled into seat 2A with a navy blue blazer draped over his briefcase and his laptop glowing with the keynote speech he was finalizing for a tech summit. A hush fell over the cabin as the confrontation began to unfold in real time. Just across the aisle, Laura Prescott, a white woman in a cream-colored wool coat, glanced around to make sure others were watching before slipping 2 crisp $100 bills into Emily's palm. "He doesn't belong here," Laura murmured, loud enough for the surrounding passengers to hear. David turned his head slowly, closing his laptop with a calm, measured breath. His voice, low but firm, cut through the growing tension. "Your corruption will cost Pinnacle more than you can imagine." Phones began to rise. 1 flash, 2, then 5. Screens glowed as passengers caught the moment. The sound of camera clicks blended with the jet's hum, tension thickening as the bribe was silently filmed from multiple angles. Emily tried to mask her discomfort with a smug smile, holding out an economy-class boarding stub. "This fits you better," she said, waving the flimsy printout in David's direction like an eviction notice. Michael Vaughn, the cabin supervisor, appeared beside her, tapping his crew tablet. "His ticket's suspect," he muttered, not to David, but to the internal crew app, typing, "Problem passenger alert, verify ID," someone in row 1 whispered. "He's causing trouble." A man near the bulkhead leaned toward his wife and murmured, "They don't usually fly first class." David didn't flinch. He reached calmly into his inner jacket pocket, withdrew the original ticket with his name printed in bold, David Harper, and placed it on his tray table like a legal exhibit. "You're sinking yourselves," he said softly, his eyes holding Emily's with chilling precision. A few feet away, Laura held her phone high, filming like a showrunner. "First class is for VIPs, not him," she sneered into the lens, smirking as she posted the clip to her story with the caption, "Pinnacle's exclusive, no intruders allowed," as if on cue. Michael reached over and cut the Wi-Fi from David's console. "You're disconnected," he said dryly, and smirked as the screen flickered black. Some passengers chuckled, others looked away. "Every word is evidence," David said, raising his own phone, still recording. That phrase wasn't for them. It was for someone who would know exactly what to do with it. As chaos simmered, a woman in seat 4A nodded subtly toward David. Nicole Ramsey, a sharp-eyed tech consultant with a Nexus badge clipped discreetly inside her tote, had been filming since the bribe. 1 row back, James Carter, a business journalist from The Verge, pulled up YouTube Live and tapped Start Broadcast diagonally across from David. Influencer Sophia Wu angled her phone for better audio capture in the back of the cabin. Olivia Grant, David's longtime financial strategist, sat silently in economy, tapping out a text. And just behind Emily, a younger black flight attendant named Tariq Malik adjusted his body cam. No one spoke, but 5 quiet allies stood ready. The flight crew didn't see it coming. Inside the hum of tension, a short, breathless video exploded onto TikTok. David had discreetly texted Olivia 1 word, "Release." Seconds later, Nicole's clip hit the platform, Laura's bribe, Emily's smirk, David's poised dignity. The audio was clear. "He doesn't belong here." The caption read simply, #Pinnacle exposed. Within 2 minutes, it had 5 million views. Sophia reposted it on Instagram with an open call for stories of first-class discrimination. Her video caption read, This happens every day. Today it ends. James's live stream surged to 45,000 viewers. And then came the roar. A chant, uncertain at first, began in row 3. Let him stay! Let him stay! It spread like lightning. Passengers stood. Someone blocked the aisle. Someone else refused to buckle their seatbelt. Emily's practiced calm collapsed. Return to your seats or we'll have to ground the flight, she shouted, but no one budged. David, still seated in 2A, turned to her. Your career's finished, he said, not as a threat, but as a sentence. The truth was, this moment wasn't new for David Harper. It was just more public. He'd grown up in Houston, a lanky kid with a second-hand keyboard and a brain wired for algorithms. At 12, while others played video games, David built one, an AI simulation that tracked racial bias in school suspensions. By 25, he was in D.C., advising on data ethics. By 35, he had written regulatory frameworks still in use at the Securities and Exchange Commission. But it was Nexus Innovations, the $3 billion tech firm he founded, that truly disrupted the old power structures. Nexus didn't just develop software, it developed integrity infrastructure. It uncovered bias in banking loans. It revealed gender gaps in corporate hiring. And just last year, its AI flagged discriminatory seating upgrades across 3 major airlines. The industry knew David Harper. It just didn't recognize him in a blazer and jeans. Now, seated calmly in 2A, David became a mirror to every injustice hidden behind policy. As Emily stumbled for words, her voice cracked. Sir, you need to cooperate. Her tone no longer held authority. It was laced with panic. Michael tried to rally her, muttering something about containment. But Nicole's phone buzzed again. 15 million views. She whispered to no one in particular. It's on fire. James, still broadcasting, looked directly into the lens. If you're watching this, you're witnessing a corporate meltdown in real time. This is how bias unravels. One phone, one seat, one man who won't be moved. Olivia's phone buzzed from economy. David's message. Get ready. She nodded once, opened her secure investor thread, and began alerting contacts. Back in first class. Tariq slipped into the jump seat beside the galley. Body cam still rolling. Michael leaned toward Emily, whispering, We need to call the captain. But it was too late. The moment had already gone global. Passengers stood arm to arm in the aisles now, recording, reposting, resisting. A woman in 1B turned to Emily and said, We're not taking off until you fix this, a man in 3C added. This isn't just about him, it's about all of us. And in that tight, tense cabin, the first cracks of an empire began to form, not with violence, not with shouting, but with quiet defiance, with phones raised, with one man, still in his seat. The cabin's uproar fueled David's corporate conquest. What had begun as an insult, "Economy's your place," was about to end in a boardroom, and as the aisle shook with protest, a calm certainty settled in David's eyes. Pinnacle Airways had just picked the wrong man to humiliate. The lights flickered. A sharp chime rang out from the overhead system, then silence, followed by a jagged red alert flashing across the cabin screen. Security risk detected. Seat 2A. Murmurs rippled through first class like a rising tide. What the hell is that? Someone muttered. Emily Sanders, sweating beneath her crisp uniform, pressed the cabin intercom and barked, Please remain calm. We're resolving a minor technical issue. But it wasn't technical. It was sabotage. Emily had triggered the alert manually, and the target was clear. David Harper, Michael Vaughn. Now seated near the cockpit door with his crew tablet in hand, had entered the security override code minutes earlier. He turned to Emily and said, I flagged him. Passenger's a risk. We need him off this flight. No one questioned it aloud, but the look in Emily's eyes said she knew what she was doing wasn't protocol. It was retaliation. "You're manufacturing threats now?" Nicole Ramsey asked from seat 4A, rising just enough to face Michael. "You're actually going to pretend he's dangerous?" Michael didn't answer. Instead, he typed rapidly, his thumbs blurring across the tablet screen. David Harper flagged. Potential falsified credentials. Passenger inciting cabin unrest. Recommend downgrade or ejection. Laura Prescott, energized by the chaos, turned back to her phone and began filming herself again. "Pinnacle's just protecting its guests," she said with a smug nod. "We don't know who this man is." Nicole raised an eyebrow, whispering to David, "They're going to fake a narrative. Are you ready?" He nodded once. "They've done worse for less." The glitching screen buzzed again, and now passengers were beginning to fidget. "Security threat in first class?" a man in 3B said to his partner. "Is this real?" A woman clutched her child closer. Another pulled her carry-on from the overhead, just in case. "Eject him!" someone shouted. "We don't feel safe." The panic spread quickly, fueled not by fact, but by engineered fear. Michael stood and held up a laminated card. "This is protocol. We have a process to follow. Passenger Harper, please step aside for a secondary screening." David didn't move. "You're violating aviation law, and you know it." Michael leaned in closer, lips tight with contempt. "You're not staying in that seat." Then, without warning, he flagged David's seat in the system with a red lock icon and whispered to the captain through his headset. "Seat 2A is now a liability." Up in the cockpit, Captain Robert Ellis took the call with a furrowed brow. "What's the situation?" "Passenger flagged. Possible threat profile. Doesn't match our seating system. Better to move him before this escalates." Ellis glanced at the roster. David Harper. The name meant nothing to him. "Is he black?" he asked quietly. "Yes." Michael replied. Ellis sighed. "Then move him before this becomes political." David sat motionless, jaw tight. The projection screen above flickered to static. Nicole leaned forward and whispered, "Want me to break their toys?" David's eyes flicked toward her. "Yes." She grinned and tapped into her encrypted phone. Within 30 seconds, the cabin screens began rebooting, not with the usual safety demonstration, but with a clean image. David Harper's confirmed ticket, seat 2A, boarding pass with barcode and timestamp, issued and validated by Pinnacle's own app. The caption across the top read, "Passenger verified." Sophia Wu caught it immediately. "They're lying," she shouted. "The system just showed he's valid." She turned her phone to face the camera and went live on Instagram. "Pinnacle's trying to throw out a verified first-class passenger. This is racial profiling. Plain and simple." Hashtags bloomed in the comments. Hashtag Pinnacle exposed and hashtag We Stand with David. Nicole's override spread to the rest of the cabin monitors. Every seat screen now displayed the same message. Fraudulent report detected. Review underway. Michael spun around, panicked. "That's forged!" he yelled. "Those aren't real credentials." "Actually, they are," Nicole said calmly. "And you just slandered the wrong man." From seat 5B, James Carter refreshed his live stream. 200,000 watching, he muttered. "It's picking up steam." He turned to his audience. "You're watching corporate discrimination in real time. No edits, no filters." Meanwhile, in the back of the plane, Olivia Grant leaned closer to her screen, typing updates to Nexus's internal legal team. Tariq Malik, who had remained mostly silent, stepped forward. He held his body cam up and approached Emily. "I heard Captain Ellis say, black men his age don't fit first class. Would you like to explain that?" Emily froze. He didn't. I mean, because I recorded it," Tariq added flatly. The footage was already uploading to the internal employee channel and being copied to a shared Nexus cloud folder in real time. Sophia, hearing Tariq's words, whipped around and shouted, "They said that? You heard that?" Her voice rose, inflamed by disbelief. "This is insane! This is blatant!" She stood in the aisle. "No one sit down. They don't get to do this." The chant returned, louder this time. "Let him stay! Let him stay!" An older man near the bulkhead threw up his hands and shouted, "You're gonna crash this company?" Emily turned to Michael. "What now?" Michael's jaw clenched. "Captain wants him gone. We escalate." Laura, loving the spectacle, decided to incite it further. "Poll time," she announced to her followers. Should Pinnacle Airlines let the disruptive man stay or move him? She posted it with a wink, choosing the poll options, boot him now or boot him faster. Nearby passengers groaned. "Are you serious?" one woman asked. "This isn't entertainment." But Laura just grinned. "Everything's entertainment." Michael stepped in once again, holding out a new printout. "Here's your economy voucher," he said coldly. "This is your last chance to cooperate." David took the paper, stared at it, then lifted his phone to the camera. "This is saved," he said, "and archived." Around him, more phones came up. James whispered to Nicole, "We're going viral across 4 platforms. This is going to hit CNN within the hour." The sting of it wasn't the demotion to economy. It was the lie. The force of a narrative being built around him, designed to paint him as angry, threatening, unworthy. And David had seen it before, in meetings where he was too assertive, on panels where his qualifications were impressive for his background. He didn't need anyone to explain the subtext. He'd written the algorithm that flagged it. Nexus Innovations had been born from moments like this, moments that robbed people of dignity under the guise of process and protocol. He leaned back in his seat and whispered to Olivia via voice note, "It's happening again. We hit back harder this time." Meanwhile, Tariq sent the captain's comment to Sophia. "This will break the internet," she said. Shaking, she turned to the camera and said, "A pilot just profiled a man based on race. It's on tape. It's going public. Now." James, who'd been live streaming for nearly 15 minutes, posted a direct link to Nexus Innovations. "If you want to know who this man is, here's the proof." The site crashed from traffic within seconds. Nicole smirked. "That's the warm-up," she whispered. Then came the twist. The monitors, which had been glitching since the fake security alert, now glowed brightly with a still image, David's verified identity, alongside a message, "Nexus CEO, confirmed ticket holder, no violations." The bottom corner read, "Uploaded by Nicole Ramsey, timestamp 11 a.m., in a split second." The conversation changed. Passengers gasped. "He's that David Harper?" someone whispered. "The guy from Nexus? Didn't they just expose bias in the finance industry?" "That's him." The flight's energy turned. Laura turned pale. Michael's hands shook. Emily stepped back. The lie had unraveled, and David hadn't left his seat. The cabin's rebellion, once sparked by humiliation, now surged with purpose. And as the tension rose, so did David's calm. He checked his watch, whispered to Olivia one word, "Prepare," and watched as the very system built to erase him began to collapse under the weight of its own deceit. The game had changed, and David Harper was just getting started. The shriek of overhead bins swinging shut could barely drown out the rising pitch of tension that now gripped the cabin. The front door of the Airbus A320 cracked open with a mechanical hiss, and 3 uniformed airport security officers stepped on board. Behind them, Captain Robert Ellis stood with arms crossed, chin tilted, projecting false authority. "Passenger Harper," he announced over the intercom, "you have been deemed a safety threat to this flight. You must relocate or disembark." Murmurs broke into audible gasps. "This is outrageous!" Nicole shouted from her seat. But the officers ignored her, advancing toward David Harper, who remained seated in 2A, calm, defiant, unshaken. "He hasn't done anything wrong!" A passenger near the bulkhead yelled. David looked up, locking eyes with Captain Ellis. "I am not moving," he said clearly. "You're making a mistake you can't undo." Ellis didn't respond. Instead, Laura Prescott, who had been refreshing her pole obsessively, stood and hurled her half-full coffee cup at David. "Just get him out of here already!" she shrieked. The cup missed his face by inches, splashing against the cabin wall. "First class isn't yours," she added, her voice screeching above the growing protests. Michael Vaughn seized the moment. "Delete him from the system," he ordered a nearby crew member. Within seconds, David's boarding profile disappeared from the crew manifest. "He doesn't exist anymore," Michael said smugly. "Problem solved." But it wasn't. Passengers were filming every second now. A reporter from NBC, seated quietly in row 1C, turned on her shoulder cam and began whispering into a lapel mic. "NBC News, live from Pinnacle Flight 394. A black CEO is being forcibly removed from his paid seat." Security reached David, one officer reaching for his elbow. "Sir, please don't resist." "I'm not resisting," David replied calmly, his phone still recording. "But I am documenting." When they took his phone, he didn't struggle. He simply turned to Nicole, who gave him the faintest nod. "Your empire's falling," he said softly, the words directed at the entire crew. As security lifted him from his seat, some passengers clapped, others looked ashamed. One elderly woman crossed herself. Sophia Wu covered her mouth and whispered to her followers, "This is disgusting. This is America right now." Emily stood stiffly by the galley, watching David be marched past her. She didn't look proud. She looked afraid. As David was pushed into economy class, passengers craned their necks, whispering, "They actually moved him? But he's the Nexus guy. Isn't he the one who exposed Citadel Bank's bias last year?" Michael watched from the front, texting on his crew app, "He's out. Flight clear." Emily exhaled in visible relief. Finally, Laura gave a triumphant smirk and leaned back into David's former seat. "Much better," she said, sipping what remained of her latte like she had conquered something. Captain Ellis returned to the cockpit, muttering, "We're back on schedule," but nothing was back to normal in the chaos of his removal. David slipped a USB drive into his blazer cuff and handed it subtly to Olivia Grant as he passed her in economy. She received it like a secret weapon and began texting furiously. "James," David whispered as he passed 5B. "You'll know what to do." James Carter, still live, understood instantly. He began uploading the drive's contents to his YouTube channel. But just as the upload started, Michael noticed. He leapt toward James, shouting, "Stop him! He's stealing data!" James pulled the USB, but it was too late. "Upload complete." "Try me," James said coolly. "It's in the cloud." Tariq Malik, who had seen it all from the jump seat, darted down the aisle, blocking Michael's path. "Touch him, and you're on tape," he warned. Michael froze, fuming, as Tariq turned to Olivia and whispered, "Send the link to everyone, now." Olivia nodded and transmitted the memo from the USB, a top-secret internal Pinnacle Airways document. The headline, "Passenger Prioritization Framework, Behavioral Risk and Demographic Sensitivity." It was damning. The document confirmed that Pinnacle Airways used race and age as unofficial screening factors when allocating seating upgrades and when flagging passengers for non-compliance. The memo had been authored by none other than Michael Vaughn, with footnotes approved by Captain Ellis. Within 4 minutes, James's video, titled Pinnacle Bias Memo Leaked, hit 80 million views. The footage of David's removal, the coffee cup incident, and the internal document appeared in split screen. Nicole pushed the footage through a private VPN to all cabin screens. Suddenly, every screen from rows 1 through 30 glowed with the headline, Pinnacle Profiling Exposed. The cabin erupted. Passengers stood again, waving phones. One shouted, "Bring him back to first class!" Another screamed, "I want off this flight!" A woman in 2B rang the attendant button and said, "I'm not flying with racists." Laura, still in David's seat, went pale. "Turn it off," she snapped. "This is fake news." But no one was listening. NBC aired the video within 5 minutes, calling it a breaking civil rights story in progress. CNN followed. Then MSNBC, #Pinnacle Exposed, trended at #1 globally. Pinnacle's stock, which had already dipped after the first video, now collapsed in real time. Market analysts scrambled. Olivia checked her watch and opened a trading app. David, seated now near the back of the plane, texted her one word, "Buy." "We're moving," she replied. Her thumbs danced across the screen, purchasing shares through a Nexus holding company. In less than 45 seconds, Nexus Innovations acquired a controlling interest. On paper, just below the radar, and completely legal. Michael, frantic, grabbed Emily by the arm. "This is getting out of hand. We need to control the narrative." "It's too late," she muttered, watching her face flash on every screen in the cabin with the subtitle, "His kind doesn't belong in first class." Michael turned to Captain Ellis, shouting through the intercom, "We have to land! Shut this down!" But Ellis had already retreated, his hands shaking. A message from the Pinnacle board had come through. Do not attempt PR control. Acknowledge the issue and prepare legal counsel. The irony was unbearable. A man they tried to erase had just become their largest stakeholder, in the back of the plane. David closed his eyes for the first time since boarding. He felt no vindication, no joy, only clarity. The time for retribution had passed. Now came the reckoning. As a passenger tapped him on the shoulder and whispered, "We're with you," David simply nodded and looked forward. The captain may have still held the controls, but David Harper had already taken the cockpit of the entire airline. At Pinnacle Airways headquarters in Dallas, the atmosphere in the executive boardroom felt more like a nuclear bunker than a center of corporate strategy. Edward Lawson, the company's beleaguered CEO, paced in front of a 12-foot digital display, where the viral video of David Harper being removed from his first-class seat played on loop. Laura Prescott's bribe, Emily's racial slur, the coffee cup sailing through the air, Michael's sneering command to delete David from the system. Beneath the footage, a bright red ticker from NBC read, "Pinnacle CEO under fire after racial discrimination caught on video. Company stock crashes 82% in 90 minutes. The #Pinnacle Exposed had topped 190 million views across platforms. Bookings were evaporating. Investors were abandoning ship. "Who the hell is David Harper?" Edward snapped, turning to his COO. "Why is everyone acting like he's the damn president of the United States?" No one answered. Finally, a junior analyst in the corner cleared his throat. "Sir, he's the founder of Nexus Innovations, former SEC advisor, built AI systems that exposed Citibank's lending practices last year. He's also..." The analyst paused, then added, "Filing something on LinkedIn." Edward whipped around. "What did you say?" "LinkedIn. Sir, he just made a post calling for impact investors to rescue Pinnacle from systemic failure. It's already at 4 million views." Silence fell over the room. Captain Ellis, now on a video call from the tarmac in New York, shifted uncomfortably. "We didn't know who he was. he offered lamely. It wasn't personal. He was making a scene. Michael Vaughn appeared on screen beside him, visibly shaken. It escalated too fast. We followed safety protocols. Edward's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. Safety protocols? You mean accepting bribes? Deleting his name from the manifest? Calling security on a tech billionaire because he made you uncomfortable? Emily's face joined the screen next, her eyes puffy, uniform wrinkled. They were all filming, she said weakly. It felt like mutiny. Edward let out a bitter laugh. No, Emily, mutiny would have been a demotion. This is a corporate assassination, and you handed them the blade. In a desperate attempt to retake control, Edward snapped at his legal team. Slander him, leak something, college arrest, old lawsuit, anything. Make him look unstable. The legal advisor shifted. Sir, that's a very bad idea. He's clean, and his team's already posting counter-narratives. We try anything, and it'll boomerang straight back. Another executive piped in. We could issue a public apology. To hell with apologies. Edward barked. We're hemorrhaging capital. Our Q3 projections are toast. Try to pull this plane up, damn it. But his voice was swallowed by another alert. Sophia Wu had just reposted Nicole Ramsey's hack video to her 9 million followers, overlaying it with David's full boarding pass, timestamp, and barcode. Along with the caption, they tried to erase him. Now he's erasing them. Elsewhere in the chaos. David sat quietly in his window seat in the rear of the plane, phone in hand, thumb hovering over the LinkedIn post button. Olivia had just sent the final draft of their buyout strategy, a leveraged acquisition campaign, targeting Pinnacle's plummeting shares through a network of socially responsible hedge funds and individual allies. A list of pre-approved investors waited at the ready. Former regulators, ESG activists, impact-driven entrepreneurs, and 3 retired senators with axes to grind against the aviation industry. This is what we were built for, Olivia had said earlier. David took a breath, then pressed post within minutes. The response was seismic. Dozens of comments poured in from tech CEOs, legal scholars, and civil rights leaders. Sophia reposted the call to action. Nicole followed suit. James Carter's YouTube feed, still live, paused mid-sentence to announce, Harper's making a move. Investors on the edge of their seats dove into the pinned link. In New York, a group of Nexus board members logged into their secure Slack thread. Buy now. Target threshold, 51%. Olivia, seated quietly in economy class with earbuds in, began executing the orders. First tranche, 12%. Second, 18%. By the time the captain announced descent into JFK, David's camp had control of 43.2% of Pinnacle Airways, more than any single entity had held in the company's 38-year history, back in Dallas. The boardroom had devolved into finger-pointing. Ellis accused Michael of misrepresenting the incident. Michael blamed Emily for losing control. Emily blamed Laura for bribery. Laura, unreachable, had deleted all her social media accounts and hired a crisis PR firm. You think I can hold this thing together? Edward shouted, waving at the crashing stock graph. This isn't a scandal. It's a digital firing squad. But then came the next blow. A secure message appeared on Edward's terminal. It was from Olivia Grant. No subject line. Just one sentence. We're now the majority shareholder. Attached was a certified ledger of Nexus shell companies, trusts, and private fund accounts, proof of control. David's voice came next, calm and firm, via a pre-recorded video that appeared across every cabin screen mid-descent. To those who stood, who filmed, who said nothing and said everything, I thank you. This isn't vengeance, it's course correction. For every denied seat, every raised eyebrow, every whispered, he doesn't belong. I belong. We all do. As the plane touched down, a quiet ripple of applause spread from back to front. Flight attendants, unsure whether to clap or cry. Stood frozen. Tariq closed his eyes and whispered, "He did it." In the boardroom, Edward finally sat down, defeated. "What now?" someone asked. The room was silent until another notification pinged. It was from CNN. Breaking. David Harper acquires controlling interest in Pinnacle Airways. Rebrand and executive restructuring imminent. Michael slumped in his chair. Ellis took off his headset. Emily reached for her badge and slowly removed it from her blazer. Edward simply stared out the window, mumbling. "We just got bought mid-flight." And somewhere over Queens, David Harper looked out of his own window, not with a smirk, not with vengeance, but with the kind of clarity that only comes after years of being underestimated. The damage had been done. The narrative had flipped. Pinnacle Airways wasn't a brand anymore. It was a lesson, and he was ready to teach it. The cabin door had barely opened at JFK when a flurry of sharply dressed executives boarded the aircraft, led by Edward Lawson himself. His face was flushed, his hair disheveled despite an obvious attempt to slick it down. Behind him trailed Captain Ellis, Michael Vaughn, and Emily Sanders, now out of uniform and visibly shaken. NBC cameras caught the moment live as Edward stepped into first class, his voice shaky but loud enough to be heard over the low cabin murmur. "Mr. Harper," he began, forcing a tight smile. "Let's not escalate this further. We are prepared to issue an apology and offer full compensation for the inconvenience." From seat 2A, his original seat, reclaimed and surrounded by supportive passengers, David Harper looked up, calm and unmoved. "This was never about an apology," he said, his voice carrying with the weight of finality. "You want to negotiate now? Fire them first? Michael, Emily, Ellis, and ban Laura Prescott from ever flying with your airline again?" Edward flinched. Ellis scoffed. "You think you can dictate terms? You're just—" He stopped himself, realizing too late that the word about to leave his lips would finish him. "I'm just what?" David asked, folding his hands. "The man who owns your airline?" The cabin fell dead silent. David reached down beside his seat, pulled out his tablet, and tapped the screen. A video began playing, captured footage of Laura slipping the $200 bribe, Emily's smirk, Michael's lies about David's ticket being suspect, and Ellis's voice from the cockpit saying, "Black men his age don't fit first class." It played without commentary, without editing, raw and undeniable. Every word hung in the air like a guilty verdict. "This footage," David said evenly, "is currently live on MSNBC and CNN, being replayed to millions, and unless you act right now, that number will double by the hour." Edward swallowed hard. "Effective immediately," he stammered. "Michael Vaughn is terminated from all duties." Gasps echoed through the cabin. "Captain Robert Ellis," Edward continued, "is hereby removed from his position, pending investigation, and Emily Sanders, you are officially discharged from service with Pinnacle Airways." Emily's face crumpled. "But she began. But David raised a hand. "No more excuses. You wrote my judgment before I sat down. Today, the pen is mine." Laura, now watching the scene unfold from her phone in a Manhattan hotel room where she had gone to escape the heat, hurled the device across the bed in fury. Seconds later, her name trended for a second time on Threads, this time tagged with #banned from Pinnacle. The company released an official statement on their feed. "Laura Prescott is permanently banned from all Pinnacle flights due to conduct unbecoming and prejudiced behavior." Back on the plane, Edward tried to regroup. "We've removed the problem individuals. What more do you want?" David stood, smoothing his blazer, then turned slowly to the cameras now fixed on him. "Who am I?" he asked, echoing the question posed by so many who had seen him as a mystery until now. "I'm David Harper, founder and CEO of Nexus Innovations, former advisor to the SEC, the man who wrote the compliance manual your industry was supposed to follow. Edward's mouth parted slightly. You advised the SEC? I helped design the aviation fairness standards that your company has been violating for years, David confirmed. And now, I own 85% of your company's voting shares. The reveal hit like a thunderclap. Some passengers gasped, others broke into applause. One flight attendant covered her mouth with both hands. Olivia, still in economy, gave a nod without expression. Her work had spoken. NBC's reporter stepped forward as a crew member adjusted her boom mic. "Mr. Harper, what happens next?" she asked. David turned toward the camera. "Next, Pinnacle becomes something new, transparent, accountable, fair. Today, we tear out the rot. Tomorrow, we build the future of aviation." The cabin erupted into applause, some passengers even standing to clap. James Carter stood up mid-broadcast and announced, "For those just joining, David Harper, former SEC advisor and Nexus CEO, has just taken full control of Pinnacle Airways following a viral incident of racial discrimination aboard this flight. This is unprecedented. It's aviation history in real time." Then came the final strike. David pulled out his phone and opened Reddit, where his team had scheduled a long-form post under his account. In it, he detailed not just his ownership, but his background in oversight, how he had been quietly purchasing airline shares for years, and how this moment, this exact injustice, had been the tipping point he'd prepared for. "Let them see me as invisible." The post read, "Because in silence, I built my power." In the first 3 minutes, the post received 21,000 upvotes and began trending on both Reddit and X. Investors, regulators, and corporate leaders began reposting his words with admiration and shock. The journalist leaned forward one last time. "Mr. Harper, any final words for the public?" David nodded, then looked directly into the camera. "Don't just fight the system. Become the system, and make it better." The takeover wasn't just completed, it was sealed in history. And every lie, every insult, every seat stolen by arrogance had just been reclaimed by justice. Within 48 hours, the glossy Pinnacle Airways logo was stripped from every terminal banner, website, and app interface. In its place gleamed a bold new emblem, Sky Justice, an airline reborn under the vision of David Harper. The rebranding was not a cosmetic facelift. It was a complete systems overhaul. As the new majority shareholder, David had swiftly installed a transitional leadership board staffed by Nexus engineers, human rights consultants, and former federal regulators. The mission was clear: no more hidden metrics, no more demographic profiling, no more pay-to-discriminate schemes dressed up as loyalty programs. On Sky Justice flights, upgrades were randomized for equity, AI monitored for fairness, and every passenger interaction was recorded, not to control, but to protect. Within the first week, he rolled out a transparency initiative called ClearPath, allowing customers to view anonymized seating allocation logs and file instant complaints that triggered real-time investigations. Olivia Grant led the finance arm of the transition, dissolving old contractor agreements riddled with discriminatory clauses and replacing them with equity-based pay models. "The skies belong to everyone," David stated in a live global broadcast, standing in front of a redesigned Airbus 320 where the words "all passengers, all people" had replaced the old corporate motto. But this transformation was more than moral. It was surgical. When Nexus forensic analysts dug into Pinnacle's buried data caches, they unearthed damning financial irregularities, off-book transactions to private consultants, covert lobbyist payments, and quarterly bonuses tied to undocumented passenger compliance metrics, a euphemism for rewarding staff who flagged and removed passengers deemed non-optical. The revelation sent shockwaves through the industry. Within days, Forbes published a special report titled The Seat-Shaming Economy: How Pinnacle Airways Monetized Bias. David didn't blink. Instead, he scheduled mandatory industry audits in partnership with the Department of Transportation. Using Nexus's AI to cross-analyze seating records from the top 5 U.S. airlines, the results were staggering across all carriers. Black passengers were 2 times more likely to be flagged for non-compliance and 40% less likely to receive free upgrades. Even with equivalent loyalty scores, the media blitz was unstoppable. Sky Justice's reforms began trending across every major platform. On Facebook, people aged 45 and up, the very demographic David had always championed, shared personal travel stories under the new campaign #FairSkiesNow. One retired veteran wrote, "I flew 3 million miles for work and never once got bumped to first class. Now I know why." Another user posted a selfie in a Sky Justice first-class seat with the caption, "I didn't pay extra. I was just treated like a human." Sophia Wu created a series of viral videos breaking down the new airline's equity-based algorithms. Nicole Ramsey hosted a live stream tutorial called What Your Seat Says About You and What It Shouldn't, watched by over 6 million viewers in 48 hours. Within weeks, other airlines, fearing exposure or loss of customers, began adopting watered-down versions of Sky Justice's model. David, unmoved, doubled down. "We're not asking the industry to follow," he said in an interview with NBC. "We're daring them to evolve or dissolve." The American Civil Liberties Union, the NAACP, and even conservative consumer watchdog groups rallied behind Sky Justice's transparency standards. Share prices surged. Investor confidence soared. The narrative had completely flipped. From scandal to solution, from humiliation to reform. Sky Justice was no longer a symbol of corporate collapse. It had become a blueprint for moral leadership in aviation. But amid the rising applause, David never let the mission drift from its origin. At every press event, in every interview, he reminded viewers of Seat 2A, of the bribe, of the smirk, of the slur. "We don't change systems by forgiving them," he said. "We change them by replacing them with better ones and better people." The reforms were working, but David knew the fight wasn't over. Hidden biases don't disappear with a rebrand. They get smarter, softer, invisible. And so he made Sky Justice not just a company, but a learning organism, one that reported itself, one that evolved, one that remembered. The industry had just been put on notice, and David Harper had done it not by yelling, not by suing, not by retaliating, but by building a higher altitude and daring everyone else to catch up. Emily Sanders applied for 27 jobs in the months following the Sky Justice takeover, not one callback. Michael Vaughn was barred from serving in any executive aviation role by federal ethics review boards. Captain Ellis, stripped of his credentials and pension, vanished from public view entirely. And Laura Prescott? Her face, once smug in a coffee-stained fur coat, became a meme for entitlement, plastered across every article about travel discrimination. The very people who had wielded power through whispers and glances were now artifacts of cautionary headlines, their actions permanently etched into the case study archives of business schools and DEI conferences. But David Harper didn't celebrate their downfall. "Accountability without redemption just recycles harm," he had said in a quiet moment. And he meant it, true to his word. David launched the Second Chance Initiative, a Sky Justice rehabilitation program for terminated Pinnacle staff willing to undergo intensive equity training, public accountability sessions, and mentoring under Nexus's reform network. Michael Vaughn was the first to apply, after a grueling vetting process. He was accepted, not back into the cockpit or boardroom, but into a digital compliance team, where he worked anonymously for months auditing the very biases he once enforced. It's not forgiveness, David clarified in an internal memo. It's stewardship. If people are willing to do the hard work of change, we can't afford to waste that opportunity. The program was soon featured on 60 Minutes, and the idea of reformed accountability began trending among corporate ethics circles. David didn't just demand better systems, he cultivated better people. Sophia Wu became the public face of Sky Justice's outreach division, educating passengers on their rights through digital content and in-flight briefings. Nicole Ramsey went on to lead Nexus's aviation tech lab, refining the AI systems that now governed every seat assignment across the airline. James Carter received a journalism award for his live reporting that exposed the scandal in real time, and now served as Sky Justice's Director of Media Integrity. Tariq Malik was promoted to Director of Cabin Culture, a new department responsible for maintaining dignity, not just safety, in the skies. Olivia Grant, David's most trusted advisor, joined Sky Justice's board, ensuring the mission stayed grounded in justice. The airline, once a cautionary tale, had become a symbol of a different kind of victory, one not built on revenge, but responsibility. Industry competitors scrambled to follow. Delta, United. Even smaller players like Jetstream began quietly phasing in equity metrics and third-party audits. A regional carrier in Europe reached out to license the Sky Justice model. Meanwhile, David met with senators in D.C., advocating for federal aviation policy to adopt similar accountability protocols. Bias at 35,000 feet is still bias, he said at a televised Senate hearing, and no one's too high to fall if they refuse to grow. But David didn't stop at policy. He invested in a digital storytelling campaign called The Seat Next to Me, inviting passengers to share stories of exclusion, of resilience, of small moments that defined their sense of worth at 3,000 feet. The stories went viral. They weren't just watched, they were felt. Then came one final, unexpected twist, 2 months after the takeover. David received a call from the CEO of Horizon Air, one of Pinnacle's fiercest rivals. "We want to partner," she said, "not just code share. Real collaboration, tech, training, accountability. We saw what you built. We want to do it together." The announcement made headlines across every major outlet. Sky Justice and Horizon join forces to launch the industry's first equity-first alliance. The post on Threads received over 5 million likes in one day. Stock surged for both companies. And for the first time in aviation history, an airline partnership wasn't celebrated for size, but for substance, in a final broadcast. David stood at a press podium beneath a banner that read, "The skies belong to everyone." He looked into the camera, not just at the audience, but through them. "Injustice tried to remove me from a seat," he said. "So I bought the plane, then I rebuilt it, and now I offer you a seat too, not based on what you look like or who you know, but because you belong. We all do." He stepped back, applause thundering. The story had begun with a stolen seat, but it ended with a new altitude, one where no one was unseen, unheard, or unworthy again. Have you ever been made to feel like you didn't belong? David Harper turned that moment into a movement. Share your story in the comments and subscribe if you believe justice should fly with all of us.